The aroma of vanilla and almond filled my kitchen, a comforting warmth on this crisp autumn morning. Almost ready, I murmured to myself, carefully smoothing the buttercream frosting over the two-tiered cake. 68 years young today, and I'd baked my own celebration cake, just as I had every year since my children were small. Velis, my daughter-in-law, had called earlier, her voice sugary sweet. Happy birthday, Marilyn. Roden and I are so excited to take you out for a special lunch. Be ready by noon, okay? We'll pick you up. I'd smiled, picturing the three of us at the Lakeside Grill, my favorite restaurant. Of course, dear, I'd replied. I'll be waiting. Little did I suspect what they truly had planned. I placed the cake in its carrier, humming softly as I tidied the kitchen. A lifetime of memories lived within these walls. Each nick on the countertop, each faded photograph on the refrigerator, a silent testament to years of laughter, love, and the occasional squabble. My late husband, George, would have chuckled at the fuss I was making over a birthday. It's just another day, Marilyn, he'd have said, his eyes twinkling, but he always made sure it was a special day. Nonetheless, he understood my love for tradition, for the simple joys of family and home. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reverie. Right on time, I said, checking my reflection in the hall mirror. I smoothed down my dress and opened the door with a welcoming smile. Roden, my son, stood there with Velis, both dressed impeccably. Happy birthday, Mom, Roden boomed, giving me a quick hug. Velis followed suit, her embrace a little less enthusiastic. Many happy returns, Marilyn, she said, her eyes darting around the house. Ready for your surprise? I laughed. You two are so secretive. Where are we going? Roden winked. It's a secret. You'll love it. He glanced at the cake carrier in my hand. What's that? He asked, a slight frown creasing his forehead. Oh, just the birthday cake I baked, I said, holding it up proudly. Velis exchanged a quick look with Roden. Marilyn, she began, her voice laced with a strange condescension. You really shouldn't have bothered. Where we're going, they have everything taken care of. You won't need to bring anything. I felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't like them. They knew how much I enjoyed baking, especially for my birthday. It's no trouble, I insisted, clutching the carrier tighter. I'll just put it in the fridge for later. Roden stepped forward, blocking my path, Mom, he said, his tone firmer now. Just leave the cake. We really need to get going. Then he's intensified, blossoming into a full-fledged sense of wrongness. Something wasn't right. Roden, I said, my voice trembling slightly. What's going on? Where are we really going? He sighed dramatically. Mom, look, we know this is difficult, but it's for the best. We've found a lovely place for you, somewhere you can be properly looked after. My heart sank. Looked after, I repeated, the words catching in my throat. What are you talking about? Velis stepped forward, her expression a mixture of pity and impatience. Marilyn, darling, it's time. We've talked about this. You can't keep living alone. It's not safe. This new place, it's beautiful. You'll have friends, activities, and people to take care of you. My mind raced. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't just take me somewhere. No, I said, my voice rising. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. I tried to push past Roden, but he held his ground. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be, he pleaded. Just come with us. You'll see. You'll like it. I looked from Roden to Velis, my eyes searching their faces for a flicker of the love and respect I'd always believed they held for me. But all I saw was determination, a cold, unwavering resolve that chilled me to the bone. Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about something else entirely. This was about control. Fine, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Let's go. I placed the cake carrier on the floor, the sweet aroma suddenly sour in the air. As I walked out of my home, the only home I'd known for nearly 50 years, I didn't look back. I knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. I had much to learn and much to reclaim. The faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips was not one of defeat, but of quiet, steely resolve. Rain lashed against the car windows, blurring the passing scenery into an indistinct green streak. Just a little further, Mom, Roden said, his voice tight. It's a surprise. Remember, Velis, beside him, offered a strained smile. You'll love it, she added, a little too brightly. I clutched my purse, the leather cool against my knuckles. Something felt wrong. This wasn't the route to the restaurant they'd promised for my birthday lunch. We were heading out of town, towards the highway that led. No, I pushed the thought away. They wouldn't. Are we lost? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Roden's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Not at all, Mom. Nearly there. Velis patted my hand. Just relax and enjoy the ride. The scenery grew increasingly familiar. Unease twisted in my stomach. We passed the old oak tree, the one with the swing Roden used to love as a child. Then the wrought iron gates came into view. My breath caught. Those gates, they belonged to Meadowbrook. Meadowbrook Assisted Living. Roden, I said, my voice sharp. Where are we going? He didn't answer, just kept driving, the tires crunching on the gravel drive. Velis squeezed my hand again. It's a lovely place, Mom. You'll be so happy here. Happy here. The blood drained from my face. You can't be serious, I whispered. You're bringing me here. Roden finally pulled up to the main entrance, the imposing brick building looming over us. He turned off the engine, the silence in the car thick with unspoken words. Happy birthday, Mom, Roden said, his voice flat. He got out of the car, came round, and opened my door. The cool, damp air hit me like a slap. Come on, he said, extending a hand. I didn't take it. You think you can just dump me here? My voice shook with disbelief. Velis joined us, her face pale. It's for the best, Mom, she said softly. You need more care than we can provide. Care, I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. I can take care of myself perfectly well. This is about my money, isn't it? My house, my investments. Roden's face hardened. Don't be ridiculous, Mom. This is about your well-being. He reached for my arm, but I flinched away. Don't touch me, I hissed. I'm not going in there. He sighed, exasperated. Look, Mom, we've already made arrangements. Your things are already inside. My things. My heart sank. My antique clock. My grandmother's silver. The paintings I'd collected over the years. They'd taken everything. You had no right, I whispered. tears welling in my eyes. Velis put a comforting hand on my shoulder. We did what we had to do. You think you've won, I said, meeting her gaze, a new hardness settling in my chest. But you haven't. You have no idea what you've done. I let them lead me inside, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling my nostrils. A man in a crisp suit approached us, a welcoming smile plastered on his face. Mrs. Quent, he said, extending a hand. I'm Mr. Kellner, the facility director. Welcome to Meadowbrook. I shook his hand, my face impassive. Thank you, Mr. Kellner, I said, my voice calm and steady. Inside, I felt a flicker of something cold and hard. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. They thought they'd taken everything. They had no idea. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea who really owned Meadowbrook. Rain lashed against the bus windows as we pulled up to Crescent Pines Assisted Living Facility. Here we are, Mother, Velis Sequence said, her voice tight. Your new home. My stomach lurched. Home? This sterile, beige building, smelling faintly of disinfectant, was not home. But I thought we're just visiting, I stammered, clutching my small handbag. It contained everything I had left, my phone, a few dollars, and a worn photograph of my late husband. Velis avoided my gaze. Roden thought it best. For your health, Mr. Kellner, the director, greeted us at the entrance with a practiced, overly bright smile. Welcome, Mrs. Quent. We're so thrilled to have you join our community. His words felt hollow, his enthusiasm forced. Velis handed him a thick folder. All the paperwork is here, she said. Her voice clicked. Mr. Kellner flipped through the documents, pausing at a signature page. Excellent. Everything seems to be in order. Just need your signature here, Mrs. Quent, and we'll get you settled in. He presented me with a form, the text swimming before my eyes. What is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Just a standard admission agreement, Mr. Kellner chirped, holding out a pen. Confirming your residency. Residency, my hands trembled as I scanned the document, a cold dread settling in my gut. This wasn't a visit. This was permanent. They had planned this, my own son and his wife. They had tricked me, used my recent bout of flu as an excuse to declare me incompetent. To don't understand, I whispered, my throat constricting. Velis placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt chillingly insincere. Don't worry, Mother. You'll be happy here. It's all taken care of. Taken care of. My 3 properties, my long-term investments, the 17% stake in Quent Corp, all taken care of. I looked at the form again, noticing a section outlining the transfer of assets. My signature was already there, forged in a clumsy imitation of my own hand. This is wrong, I stammered, my voice rising. Mother, please, Velis said, her tone sharp. Don't make a scene. It's for your own good. For whose good? I wondered. Certainly not mine. I glanced around the sterile lobby, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was trapped. They had taken everything. My home, my independence, my dignity. Let's get you to your room, shall we? Mr. Kellner said, his smile faltering slightly as he sensed my distress. He led me down a long, antiseptic hallway, the walls adorned with generic floral prints. My legs felt heavy, my steps slow, each step felt like a surrender, a confirmation of their victory. They showed me to a small, sparsely furnished room, a single window overlooking the parking lot. "This is cozy," I managed, forcing a weak smile. Velis began unpacking my meager belongings from the small bag I clutched. "Julian helped us pack your things from the house," she said casually. "We thought you'd prefer a fresh start here." A fresh start. They had emptied my house, stripped me of my possessions, erased my life as if it had never been. I watched numbly as Velis arranged my few remaining belongings on the dresser, a pathetic display of what was left of my life. My eyes fell on the photograph of my husband, his kind eyes seeming to offer solace in this moment of despair. "We'll come visit soon," Velis said, kissing my cheek with a practiced air of affection. "Don't worry about a thing, Mother. You're in good hands." She left, followed by Mr. Kellner, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of the room. I sank onto the hard bed, the weight of their betrayal crushing me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. But as the initial wave of despair subsided, something else began to stir within me, a quiet resolve, a flicker of defiance. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything, but they were wrong. They didn't know the full extent of my resources. They didn't know about the Swiss accounts, the offshore investments, the carefully concealed ownership of Crescent Pine's parent company, the very company that now held me captive. I looked out the window at the rain-swept parking lot, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. They had underestimated me, and that would be their undoing. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. The stale, floral air of Mr. Kellner's office did little to mask the rising panic in my chest. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding about my residency here," I began, my voice trembling slightly. Mr. Kellner, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, folded his hands on his desk. "A misunderstanding, Mrs. Quent. I assure you all the paperwork is in order." He gestured to a thick file, its label bearing my name. "Signed and delivered." My stomach clenched. Signed. My signature was forged, obviously, but arguing that now seemed pointless. "I'd like to see those documents," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though fury simmered beneath the surface. He hesitated, that insincere smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mrs. Quent. Client confidentiality, you see." He tapped the file. "Everything is perfectly legal." Legal. Roden and Velis had actually thought they could pull this off. The goal of it was breathtaking. They'd taken my house, my car, emptied my accounts, and dumped me here, thinking I was too old, too frail, to fight back. My son, Roden, arranged all of this, didn't he? I asked, watching his face carefully. Mr. Kellner's smile tightened. "Your son has your best interests at heart, Mrs. Quent. This is a lovely facility, with excellent care. Care I hadn't asked for, didn't need." I felt a wave of nausea. "And my belongings?" I asked, forcing myself to stay focused. "Where are they, Mr.?" Kellner waved a dismissive hand. "They've been taken care of." Taken care of. Another euphemism for stolen. My grandmother's antique clock, the paintings I'd collected over the years, The photo albums chronicling a lifetime of memories all gone. I closed my eyes for a moment, fighting back the tears. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not after everything I'd built, everything I'd achieved. Mr. Kellner, I said, opening my eyes and meeting his gaze directly. I need to make a call. He hesitated, but seeing the steely resolve in my eyes, he finally nodded and gestured towards the phone on his desk. My hand trembled as I dialed the number, a number I hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Quent Holdings. A surge of power, a flicker of something like hope, ignited within me. This is Marilyn Quent, I stated, my voice regaining its strength. I need to speak with Mr. Hayes immediately. There was a pause, a rustling of papers. One moment, Miss Quent. While I waited, I looked round Mr. Kellner's office, taking in the details I hadn't noticed before: the cheap prints on the wall, the slightly worn furniture, the faint smell of disinfectant. It was a far cry from the luxurious offices of Quent Holdings. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. Miss Quent, Mr. Hayes' voice boomed through the receiver. It's good to hear from you. To what do I owe the pleasure? I glanced at Mr. Kellner, who was now watching me with open curiosity. I'm calling from Meadowbrook Assisted Living, I said, my voice calm and even. It seems there's been a clerical error regarding my residency. Mr. Hayes chuckled. A clerical error? At Meadowbrook? I'll look into it personally. Is there anything else, Ms. Quent? Yes, I said, my eyes fixed on Mr. Kellner's increasingly pale face. I'd like to schedule a meeting with the board of directors. Tomorrow morning, if possible. I have some concerns about the management of this facility. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with anticipation. Of course, Miss Quent. I'll arrange it immediately. Shall I send a car for you? A car? I almost smiled. That won't be necessary, Mr. Hayes. I have other arrangements. I hung up the phone, the weight of Mr. Kellner's stare heavy on me. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. I believe, I said, my voice now laced with steel, we have much to discuss. The fear in his eyes was a small, but satisfying victory. This, I thought, is just the beginning. The fluorescent lights of Mr. Kellner's office hummed, a stark contrast to the roaring in my ears. I assure you, Mrs. Quent, everything is in order, he'd said, his voice smooth as the fake mahogany of his desk. He slid a manila folder across the polished surface. These are the admission documents you signed. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for them. Signed. I hadn't signed anything. Roden and Velis Sequence had assured me this was a temporary respite. A spa-like getaway. Just a few days, Mom Roden had said, his hand resting a little too firmly on my arm as he guided me through these unfamiliar doors. Velis Sequence, ever the picture of solicitousness, had chirped, you deserve a break, Marilyn. Think of it as an extended vacation. Vacation? Right. I pulled the first document from the folder, the crisp paper crackling in the silence. It was a standard admission form, filled with medical jargon and legalese. My eyes scanned the page, searching for the signature line. There it was, scrawled at the bottom in a shaky imitation of my handwriting. My heart pounded against my ribs. A trapped bird desperate for escape. This isn't my signature, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Mr. Kellner's smile faltered, just a flicker, but I caught it. I'm afraid you must be mistaken, Mrs. Quent, he replied, his tone now laced with a hint of impatience. We have all the necessary paperwork. I pulled out the next document, a power of attorney granting Roden full control over my finances. Another forgery, and then another, each signature a cruel mockery, a testament to their deception. The room seemed to spin, the hum of the lights growing louder, more insistent. I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. They had taken everything. My home, my savings, my freedom, all of it stolen while I was lulled into a false sense of security, believing in their love, their concern. Mr. Kellner, I said, my voice now a low murmur. I need to make a phone call. He hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. I'm not sure that's possible, Mrs. Quent. Visiting hours are, he began, but I cut him off. This isn't a social call, I stated, my voice regaining some of its former strength. It's a business call, and it's crucial. I met his gaze, holding it steadily, something in my eyes, perhaps the glint of steel that even I could feel hardening within me, made him pause. He finally nodded, pushing a phone across the desk. 5 minutes, he said. My fingers dialed the familiar number, each press a small victory. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Good afternoon, Miss Quent. How can I assist you? It was Miss Davies, my personal assistant, the gatekeeper of my other life, the life Roden and Velis sequence knew nothing about. Miss Davies, I said, my voice calm and controlled. I need you to access the Quent Holdings portfolio, specifically the ownership records for Elderwood Living Solutions. There was a slight pause on the other end. Then, one moment. Ms. Quent. The silence stretched, filled only with the muted hum of the fluorescent lights. Mr. Kellner shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes fixed on me. He didn't know. None of them knew, Miss Quent. Miss Davies' voice came back on the line. I have the records. You currently hold 17% of Elderwood Living Solutions, making you the majority shareholder. 17%. Enough. Thank you, Miss Davies, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. I'll be in touch shortly. I hung up the phone, the click echoing in the sudden quiet of the office. Mr. Kellner's face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. What was that about? He stammered. I simply smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a chill down his spine. Mr. Kellner, I said, my voice soft but firm. I believe we have some things to discuss, starting with my vacation. The look on his face, the dawning realization of his precarious position, was almost as satisfying as the thought of what was to come, almost. Because this was just the beginning, the first domino in a long line, waiting to be toppled. And I, Marilyn Quent, was about to start the chain reaction. The forced smile Velis sequence had plastered on her face as they wheeled me into this place. I'd make sure it was wiped clean off soon enough. The evening shadows stretched across my room, painting the floral wallpaper in hues of gray and violet. I ran my hand over the worn leather of my journal. a familiar comfort in this unfamiliar place. My mind kept returning to the missing items from my suitcase, the pearl necklace Velis had always admired, the antique locket containing a picture of my late husband, and the small, velvet pouch holding the key to my safe deposit box. At first, I dismissed their absence as an oversight in the hurried packing, but now sitting here in the quiet of my room, a cold certainty settled in my stomach. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. They wanted those items. They needed them gone. Everything all right, Mrs. Quent. A gentle knock startled me. It was Emilio, one of the kindest nurses on staff. Just fine, dear, I replied, forcing a smile. Lost in thought. That's all. She hesitated, a concerned look on her face. If you need anything, just ring. I will, thank you. As soon as the door clicked shut, the smile faded. My son, Roden, and his wife, Velis Sequence, hadn't simply brought me here for respite. They'd brought me here to steal from me. They thought they could strip me of my possessions, my independence, my very life, and I would just fade away. I opened my journal, the crisp pages inviting me to pour out my thoughts. My pen trembled slightly as I wrote. They underestimate me. They see an aging woman, confined to this place, and they think they've won. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. They had no idea at all. They didn't know about the investments I'd carefully cultivated over the years, the properties I'd acquired, the safety net I'd woven so meticulously, and they certainly didn't know about my ownership stake in Elderwood Care, the parent company that owned this very facility. 17% a silent, controlling interest that I'd kept hidden, a secret weapon for a rainy day. It seemed that rainy day had arrived. I spent the next few hours meticulously outlining my plan. Every detail needed to be perfect, every move calculated. I needed to expose Roden and Velis Sequence for the vultures they were, but I needed to do it quietly, surgically. No messy confrontations, no public scandals. I would dismantle their scheme from within, using their own greed against them. The first step was information. I needed to know exactly what they'd taken, what they were planning to do, and how much time I had. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Mr. Henderson," I said when a gruff voice answered. "It's Marilyn Quent. I need a favor." Mr. Henderson was my lawyer, a shrewd and discreet man who had handled my affairs for decades. I explained the situation, the missing items, my suspicions. He listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with a pointed question. "I understand, Mrs. Quent," he said finally. "I'll begin the investigation immediately. I'll also look into the legalities of your current situation at the facility. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Discretion is paramount." "Of course, Mrs. Quent. You can rely on me." Hanging up, a sense of calm settled over me. The wheels were in motion. I glanced at the reflection in the mirror-attired woman, her face etched with worry. But beneath the surface, something else was stirring, a quiet strength, a steely resolve. They thought they could take everything from me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Mr. Kellner, the facility director. He seemed surprised by my request but agreed readily. "Good morning, Mrs. Quent," he said, bustling into my room. "What can I do for you, Mr. Kellner?" I began, my voice steady and clear. "I'm concerned about a few missing items from my belongings." I listed the necklace, the locket, and the key, watching his face carefully. He stammered something about looking into it, but his eyes darted nervously round the room. "I'm sure you understand, Mr. Kellner," I continued, "how important these items are to me." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I've also been reviewing the Elderwood Care shareholder registry. It's been some time since I've attended a board meeting." His face paled. He knew. He knew exactly who I was. "Mrs. Quint," he stammered. "I had no idea indeed," I said, cutting him off. "I trust this matter will be resolved swiftly and discreetly." He nodded quickly, practically tripping over himself to leave the room. I watched him go, a small smile playing on my lips. The game was afoot, and I was just getting started. I had a feeling the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday was going to be interesting. The cheap floral wallpaper in my room seemed to mock me. How dare they, I thought. How dare Roden and Velis Sequence do this to me? They'd ship me off to Crescent Pines assisted living, claiming it was a short-term respite care stay while they renovated my house. Renovated. They were gutting it, stripping it bare like vultures picking at a carcass. My house, my life, theirs now, apparently. But not for long. I sat on the edge of the bed, the thin blanket scratching against my skin. The bedside lamp cast a sickly yellow glow, doing little to dispel the gloom that had settled over me. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me, building a life, brick by brick, after my husband passed. The long hours, the calculated risks, the quiet satisfaction of watching my investments grow. I hadn't just built a comfortable life for myself. I'd built a fortress, and they had no idea. My mind drifted back to a meeting years ago, a quiet conversation in a wood-paneled office. The acquisition of Crescent Pines by Elderwood Healthcare, a company I'd invested heavily in, had been a strategic move. "Diversification is key, Marilyn," my advisor had said. "Healthcare is a growing sector." He was right, of course. It had proven to be a shrewd investment, my 17% stake quietly appreciating over the years. 17%. More than enough. I opened my eyes, a small, determined smile playing on my lips. They thought they had me cornered, trapped in this gilded cage. They thought they'd outsmarted me, taken everything I'd worked for. Foolish children, I murmured to myself, the words barely a whisper in the quiet room. They hadn't even bothered to check. They'd been so blinded by their greed, so eager to get their hands on what they believed was mine, that they'd overlooked the most crucial detail. They didn't realize that Crescent Pines, this very place they'd so carelessly deposited me in, ultimately belonged to me, or at least a significant portion of it did. I reached for the phone, the cool plastic a welcome contrast to the burning anger I felt. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, a number that connected me to power, to influence, to the very heart of Elderwood Healthcare. "Hello, George," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's Marilyn Quint. We need to talk." There was a pause, a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Marilyn, is that really you? It's been ages. How are you?" George's voice was a mix of surprise and genuine warmth. He had always been fond of me, I'm well, George, I replied, keeping my voice even. But we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. I explained my predicament, carefully choosing my words, painting a picture of a concerned mother taken advantage of by her greedy children. I didn't reveal the full extent of my ownership, merely hinting at my influence within Elderwood. I'm disappointed, George, I said, letting the word hang in the air. I trusted my son and his wife, and they've betrayed that trust in the most egregious way. I find myself in a rather uncomfortable position. George was sputtering with indignation. Marilyn, I am so sorry to hear this. This is unacceptable. Tell me what you need. What can I do? Well, George, I began a plan forming in my mind. I need to see some documentation. The ownership records for Crescent Pines, specifically, and perhaps the facility's financial statements for the last 5 years. It seems there might be some irregularities need investigating. George readily agreed. Consider it done, Marilyn. I'll have everything couriered to you first thing tomorrow morning. And don't you worry, we'll get to the bottom of this. No one takes advantage of one of our valued stakeholders and gets away with it. He emphasized valued stakeholders in a way that told me he understood exactly the unspoken message I was sending. I ended the call, a sense of calm satisfaction washing over me. The wheels were in motion. Soon, Roden and Velis Sequence would understand the magnitude of their mistake. They thought they had inherited a fortune. They thought they had outmaneuvered me. They were about to learn a very valuable lesson about underestimating their mother. I glanced at the cheap floral wallpaper again. It didn't seem quite so mocking now. In fact, it almost looked cheerful. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile this time. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. The first flakes of a winter storm began to fall outside my window, a silent promise of the change that was coming, a change I was going to bring about myself. Night had fallen, the kind that pressed against the window pane with a damp chill. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched in my hand. It was time. I dialed Kerr's number, the familiar ring echoing the steady beat of my own resolve. Kerr, it's Marilyn, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need your help. There was a pause, a rustle of papers perhaps, on the other end of the line. Marilyn, how are you? It's been ages. Everything all right? He asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. I took a deep breath. Not exactly, I admitted. I'm in a bit of a predicament. I explained my situation to Kerr, keeping my voice level, recounting the events of the past few weeks with a detached precision that surprised even me. The forced move into Meadowbrook, the missing property deeds, the sickening realization that Roden and Velis had orchestrated the entire charade. Kerr listened patiently, only interrupting with the occasional unbelievable or low whistle of disbelief. So, they essentially stole everything? He asked when I'd finished. Effectively, I replied. They assumed I was senile, a doddering old woman who wouldn't notice. They're in for a rather rude awakening. There was a short silence. Then tell me what you need. Marilyn, I outlined my plan. It was intricate, a carefully constructed web designed to ensnare Roden and Velis in their own greed. Kerr was the key. He had access to the legal resources I needed, the power to pull the right strings and expose their deception. You own 17%, Of Quent Holdings. Correct, he confirmed. That's right, I said. And Quent Holdings owns Meadowbrook Assisted Living. He continued. Among other things, I affirmed. He chuckled. A low rumble in his chest. This changes things considerably. They'd put you in a facility owned by you. Precisely, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. They thought they were being clever. They underestimated me. We spent the next hour discussing the finer points of the plan, the legal documents required, the timing of the reveal. Kerr assured me he could assemble the necessary team, the lawyers, the investigators, everyone needed to dismantle Roden and Velis's scheme brick by carefully placed brick. Consider it done, Marilyn, he said finally. We'll have the wheels in motion by tomorrow morning. Thank you, Kerr, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. I knew I could count on you. We hung up, and I sat there for a moment, the silence of the room amplifying the quiet hum of anticipation within me. The first piece was in place. The game, as they say, was afoot. Roden and Velis thought they had won, that they had successfully sidelined me, relegated me to the fringes of their lives. They were about to learn a very valuable lesson about underestimating a mother's love and a woman's wrath. I looked out at the night sky, a faint sliver of moon peeking through the clouds. It wouldn't be long now. Soon, very soon, the tables would turn. I picked up a small, ornate music box from my bedside table. It was a gift from my late husband, a treasured keepsake I'd managed to keep hidden from Roden and Velis's grasping hands. I opened it, the delicate melody filling the room, a soothing balm against the lingering sting of betrayal. The music was a reminder of happier times, a promise of the peace I would soon reclaim. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, the kind of hope that comes not from blind faith, but from the quiet knowledge that you hold all the cards. They had played their hand, and now it was my turn. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a thrill of anticipation mixed with a cold, hard resolve. They wanted a game. They were about to get one. Sunlight streamed through the blinds in Mr. Kellner's office, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I sat across from him, a steaming cup of tea untouched before me. I've had some time to reflect, Mr. Kellner, I began, my voice calm despite the turmoil within, and I've made a decision regarding my stay here at Meadowbrook. He leaned forward, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Oh, he said, his voice a little too high-pitched. And what have you decided, Mrs. Quent? I took a slow sip of tea, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. I've decided, I said, setting the cup down with a decisive click, that I quite enjoy the amenities here. The gardens are lovely, the staff attentive. His eyes widened slightly. So you'll be staying? He asked. I offered a small, enigmatic smile. For a while, yes. Perhaps a week or two. I do need to reorganize some personal affairs. He visibly relaxed, the tension easing from his shoulders. Well, that's wonderful news. Mrs. Quent, he said, a forced cheerfulness returning to his voice. We're delighted to have you. If there's anything at all you need, please don't hesitate to ask. I nodded graciously. There is one thing, Mr. Kellner, I said, my voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. He straightened in his chair. Of course, Mrs. Quent. Anything. I fixed him with a steady gaze. I believe there was a misunderstanding regarding the ownership of certain assets. His smile faltered. Assets, he repeated, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Yes, I said, opening my handbag and retrieving a small, unassuming folder. I slid it across the desk towards him. I believe these documents will clarify matters. He hesitantly picked up the folder, his fingers fumbling with the clasp. Inside were copies of the corporate filings, clearly showing my 17% stake in Golden Horizons, Meadowbrook's parent company. His face paled as he scanned the documents, his eyes widening with each passing line. I don't understand, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I was led to believe I raised a hand to stop him. I believe you were misled, Mr. Kellner, I said, my voice firm but not unkind, by certain individuals who had their own agendas. He swallowed hard, his gaze darting between the documents and my face. Mrs. Quent, he began, I assure you, I had no idea. I know you didn't, Mr. Kellner, I interrupted, my tone softening slightly, which is why I'm giving you the opportunity to rectify this situation. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and hope. Rectify how? He asked. By ensuring, I said, my voice regaining its steeliness, that my son and his wife understand the full implications of their actions. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. They will be vacating my properties immediately. All my belongings will be returned, and I added, a touch of ice creeping into my voice, they will never again attempt to interfere with my affairs. He nodded rapidly, eager to agree. Of course, Mrs. Quent. I'll see to it personally. He reached for the phone, his hand trembling slightly. I'll call them right away. I stopped him with a gesture. Not yet, Mr. Kellner, I said. I have a better idea. I explained my plan to him, watching as his initial shock gradually morphed into grudging admiration. It was a simple plan, really. Nothing dramatic or overtly vengeful, just a quiet, subtle shifting of power, a reminder that I was not as helpless as they had assumed. I believe this arrangement, I said, my voice regaining its earlier calmness, will be beneficial for all parties involved. Don't you agree, Mr. Kellner? He swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. Yes, Mrs. Quent, he said, his voice barely audible. I believe it will. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. It felt good to be back in control, to have my life, my assets, firmly back in my grasp. Excellent, I said, rising to my feet. Then I believe we understand each other perfectly. I left him sitting there, surrounded by the scattered documents, a man suddenly grappling with the realization that he had severely underestimated the quiet, unassuming woman he had thought so easily manipulated. As I strolled out of his office, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. I wasn't just leaving his office. I was walking away from the vulnerability, the betrayal, the fear. And as I stepped back into the sunshine, I knew this wasn't just the beginning of my reclamation. It was the dawn of something new, something stronger, something entirely my own. I had one last stop to make before leaving Meadowbrook, and I couldn't resist a small smile. Velis and Julian wouldn't see it coming. The crisp morning air, tinged with the scent of pine needles, felt deceptively fresh against the stale reality of crescent pines. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, observing the breakfast service with a detached curiosity. "Oatmeal again, or resident?" Mrs. Petrov sighed. "It's like they've never heard of variety." I offered a sympathetic smile, though my mind was elsewhere. "I agree," I murmured. "A little change never hurt anyone." My gaze drifted to the chipped paint on the windowsill, a small detail that spoke volumes about the facility's true state of upkeep. Over the past few days, I had made it my business to observe, to truly see the cracks beneath the polished veneer Velis and Rodin had presented. It was a calculated move, a necessary step in my quiet campaign. Later that morning, during the scheduled activities, I found myself observing a bingo game, the rhythmic calling of numbers a dull drone against the forced cheerfulness of the staff. "B12, the young activities director chirped, her voice strained. I watched as one resident, Mr. Henderson, struggled to mark his card, his hand trembling with age. He fumbled his marker, dropping it onto the floor. No one moved to help him, not even the director. I leaned forward, picking up the marker and handing it back to him. "Here you go, Mr. Henderson," I said softly. He looked up at me, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Quent," he whispered. "You're very kind." This small interaction, however, solidified my growing suspicion the care here was superficial, a performance for visiting families, not a genuine commitment to the residents' well-being. My observations continued throughout the day. I noticed a distinct lack of fresh fruit and vegetables on the menu, replaced by processed, prepackaged meals. "Is the chicken always this dry?" I asked a nurse during lunch. "Budget cuts," she muttered under her breath, quickly moving away before I could press further. During an afternoon stroll in the gardens, I overheard two orderlies complaining about their heavy workload and inadequate staffing. "They keep admitting new residents," one grumbled, "but they're not hiring any more staff. We're run ragged." This confirmed my suspicions. Crescent Pines, under Rodin's supposed management, was being run into the ground, likely to maximize short-term profits. He and Velis weren't just after my assets. They were exploiting the vulnerable residents in their care. Back in my room, I reviewed the meticulously compiled notes I'd taken over the past few days. The evidence was damning. Instances of neglect, cost-cutting measures that compromised resident care, and a clear pattern of financial mismanagement. It painted a grim picture, but it also provided me with the ammunition I needed. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It was about exposing the truth and ensuring the well-being of everyone residing within these walls. The next day, I requested a meeting with Mr. Kellner, the facility director. He appeared nervous, fidgeting with his tie as he sat opposite me. "Mrs. Quent," he began, "is there something I can help you with?" "Indeed, Mr. Kellner," I replied, my voice calm and measured. "I have some concerns about the management of this facility." I presented him with my meticulously documented findings, outlining the instances of negligence and financial discrepancies. His face paled as he scanned the documents, his initial nervousness morphing into outright fear. He stammered. I wasn't aware I met his gaze, my expression unwavering. "I'm sure you weren't," I said. But now you are, and I expect you to take action. Mr. Kellner, now fully aware of the precariousness of his position, agreed to cooperate. He knew that my influence, as a significant shareholder in the parent company, far outweighed Roden's flimsy authority. He pledged to rectify the issues I had highlighted and to provide me with regular updates on the facility's operations. My leverage, my silent power, had shifted the balance of control. Later that evening, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. A sense of quiet satisfaction settled over me. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't resorted to dramatic confrontations. I had simply used my knowledge, my resources, to expose the truth and reclaim my agency. The thought of Velis and Roden's faces when they realized the extent of my power, the realization that their scheme had backfired spectacularly, brought a faint smile to my lips. My revenge wouldn't be a loud explosion, but a slow burn, a quiet dismantling of their greed and deception. They believed they had outsmarted me, confined me to this gilded cage. They had no idea what I had in store for them. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I picked up the phone, dialing a familiar number. "Hello, James," I said, my voice steady. "It's time to initiate phase 2. The soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminated the plush, unfamiliar room. I scrolled through Roden's social media feed, a bitter taste rising in my throat. There it was, photo after photo of Roden and Velis sequence beaming, champagne flutes raised high, celebrating our good fortune. The caption read, followed by a string of celebratory emojis. "A new chapter begins," Velis had added in the comments. Another picture showed them posing in front of what I recognized as my own summer house, the one they'd always coveted. "Early retirement. Here we come," Roden had declared. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated bull. They thought they had won. They thought they had outsmarted me, stripped me bare, left me to wither away in this gilded cage. I closed my laptop, the click of the lid echoing in the silent room. A slow, steady smile spread across my face. They had no idea. None whatsoever. I picked up my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mr. Henderson," I said when he answered. "It's Marilyn Quent. Everything is proceeding as planned. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp." There was a pause, then his voice, hushed with anticipation, "Understood. Mrs. Quent, consider it done." I spent the rest of the evening reviewing the documents, every signature, every clause, every meticulously crafted detail. I had anticipated this, planned for it, woven a safety net so intricate they wouldn't even realize they were entangled until it was too late. My 17% stake in Elderwood Living, the parent company that owned this very facility, wasn't something I advertised. It had been a quiet investment, a safeguard for my future, one I never imagined I'd have to use against my own flesh and blood. But Roden and Velis's greed had blinded them. They'd seen an easy target, a frail old woman they could manipulate and discard. They hadn't bothered to look deeper, to question why I'd signed over my assets so readily. They hadn't considered that I might have a few tricks up my sleeve. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, painting the room in a warm, golden hue. I dressed carefully, choosing a crisp, tailored suit and my favorite pearl necklace, a touch of lipstick, a glance in the mirror, and I was ready. As I walked down to the dining room, I saw Roden and Velis already seated at their usual table, looking remarkably smug. "Morning, Mother," Roden said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Slept well, like a baby," I replied, my smile unwavering. "And you?" Velis shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Fine, thank you," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Just then, Mr. Kellner, the facility director, approached our table. He looked pale and flustered. "Mrs. Quint," he stammered. There's been a slight misunderstanding." "Oh," I raised an eyebrow. "Do tell." He cleared his throat nervously. "It seems there's been an error with the paperwork regarding your residency." He glanced at Roden and Velis, his eyes wide with apprehension. "A rather significant error." Roden spluttered. "What are you talking about?" "Everything is in order. We have the documents." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Actually, Roden," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I believe I have the documents." I pulled a thick manila envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. "This," I continued, "is the official record of ownership for Elderwood Living, showing my 17% controlling stake, along with documentation of the fraudulent transfer of my assets." The color drained from Roden's face. Velis stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "But how?" Roden stammered. "I anticipated your little scheme," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "I knew you'd try something like this eventually, so I took precautions." I turned to Mr. Kellner. "I believe I requested a full audit of the facility's finances, focusing particularly on recent transactions involving my son and his wife." Mr. Kellner nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "The auditors are here now, Mrs. Quint." Roden and Velis's carefully constructed world crumbled around them. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to panic, their celebratory glow replaced by a stark, cold fear. I watched them squirm, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling within me. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for acquiescence. They had learned a valuable lesson today. Never underestimate a mother's love or her ability to protect what is hers. I stood up, smoothing down my jacket. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, my voice laced with a newfound authority. "I have a summer house to reclaim.